Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today I have with me Brent. How are you doing, Brent?
Doing well, doing quite well.
Excellent. Now, just to let the audience know who you are and so on, would you mind just kicking off and giving everyone an introduction to who you are and what awesome things you do?
Yeah, sure thing. My name's Brent Zahradnik. I'm from Eastern United States and live currently in Southern France, where I'm talking to you from here in sunny Montpellier. And for 4 or 5 years now, I've run an Amazon advertising agency. So we work with businesses that are selling on Amazon, using it as a platform in both North America and European marketplaces, and have a team of 13 approaching 14 people, depending on how many people get back to us with our recent round of hiring.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that sounds great. So have you sort of had the same direction all the time since you started the business, or have it changed a lot, or
no,
have you gotten
not at
to
all.
where you are?
Things have totally changed. So just a brief recap of the history. I mean, I started this company in 2015. In fairly early 2015, I was exploring the possibilities of how can I make money online, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with 4-hour work week and these kinds of concepts, right? And so I was like, well, I want to travel more. I want to have more flexibility and freedom. How do I start to do this? And I tried a couple of things like running websites and doing other kinds of things. It just didn't work out. I do have a background in Google Ads, so it kind of turned into something with advertising, because I did that for a couple of years in an agency beforehand. And I had a friend who at the time was selling on Amazon and said, hey, you know something about ads, don't you? Can you help me with these ads on Amazon? And I said, this looks like a joke. And sure enough, in 2015, Amazon's ad platform really was a joke. But now, 5 years later, they've put billions of dollars into it, and it's a huge thing. So, at first, I never thought, I'll be hiring people, I'll have a team, we'll have roles, we'll have responsibilities, and we'll have KPIs and all these things. I just thought, hey, you know what? I want to start helping Amazon sellers with this. And at the time, I was also thinking, Amazon sellers, FBA, which is very hot at that time. And, sure enough, that got me to where I am now. But the vision for it has changed drastically. It's a company that's much larger and much more important than just me now. At the start, that wasn't the case.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, that's. It's what most companies go through. You're definitely one of the ones that have made it through the 1,000 days, so that's a good start.
At this point,
it's always an interesting journey, and yeah. When did you hire your first employee, Brent?
I think part-time, that would be 2016, towards the end of 2016.
Okay.
And that person is actually still with us today and is one of the more senior members of the team, and does very well with the kind of elevated responsibilities and role that he has. So I would say that was a good hire. Yeah, pretty confident with that one. And that was
awesome.
Late 2016. Yeah, I remember because I was in Japan at the time, and he was in the time zone a couple hours earlier, so we had to coordinate that first couple interview calls.
Yeah, it's never easy. What's been your biggest challenge so far? I mean, you've been going for about 5 years. What's been your biggest challenge so far, management-wise, in the business?
That's a good question. I would say one thing that I've done well, and other people on the team who now help me with hiring have done well, has been selection. So we've had very few people we've ever picked for the team that haven't been a really good cultural and kind of personality and initiative fit. I got a very valuable idea from, I think, Mike from Ad Badger and Search Scientists, who said to me, you should look for people who are batteries included, which means, when you buy a toy, it comes with batteries. The idea being you have someone on the team who comes to you and they want to work with you. They're self-motivated. They're the kind of person who's ready to take responsibility and lead the charge, whatever that might be. And that has been a good guiding principle. So that I think I've done well. The thing that I've done poorly is probably training. So getting adequate training for something as complex as Amazon PPC ad management, which continues to get more and more complex, is a real challenge. So that was probably the area that we're most deficient in. And now this year, we're actually starting to redo our kind of roles and responsibilities and just redid our org chart like 2 weeks ago. So firming that up has also been a challenge.
Yep, totally. Have you ever had any of those absolutely horrible, oh shit, how am I going to pay my staff moments?
No, thankfully not, actually. Never had to draw on my own funds to do that. I mean, I would do that if it came down to the wire, but you know, our margins are good enough that that's not been a problem, and we're fairly conservative with like what we spend on. You know, like I said, the company's been around since 2015. Only last month did we upgrade Slack to the paid version. So you can tell we're kind of cheap in some areas for sure. It's kind of like Amazon, right? They're thrifty. They pay attention to where money goes out. And, you know, I pay big bonuses at the end of the year for some team members and stuff. So that does get invested back in people. And that's a good feeling. But yeah, we've never had one of those issues where I've had to like say, you know, Mom, can I get $5,000 or like call my credit card and up the limit? Hasn't happened yet. Yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
That's very good. Very good.
Yeah,
no need to go there. No need to go there if you don't have to.
Not just yet. Not just yet. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. What about sort of from a growing your team standpoint? How many managers and like how does your organization look like from that standpoint? Like, are everyone reporting to you, or do you have managers of various departments, or how does the company look like at the moment?
Sure, I'll try to give you a top-down overview of what I hope it'll look like by the end of this month, because we are doing a bit of a shuffle. You know, I won't go into the history because that's not terribly interesting, but at this moment, we have myself, who I prefer to just say founder, and you know I'm responsible for a lot of the top level stuff like sales and marketing at this point. Do a lot of like helping with content creation, that sort of thing. And then we have it split into different sections. So we have finance, and there's someone who heads that. Reporting, someone who heads that. There's marketing, and someone who we have kind of as a part-time CMO at the moment. So we don't need all their power full bore just yet. And then we have someone who's a COO, who's kind of like you know, the operations person, who's my right hand. And then the other person I alluded to earlier, I'm not going to go into names just for privacy reasons, in case people aren't comfortable with that. But the guy who is my first hire is now the kind of head of ad strategy. And then under that, we have kind of like teams. And each of the teams has an animal name, actually. And it's like a senior account manager and then one or more junior account managers. And if those junior account managers have problems, it's their job to report to the senior account managers for assistance. And sometimes those things get escalated up to me, depending on like how you know, how intensive a question it is about like account management or difficulty with the client's account or reaching their goals or whatever. But yeah, it's mostly these pods, like these kind of management pods that people team up with. And that means that those groups of people sometimes work on the same accounts, but not always. And the team is always expected to help each other with stuff too. So that's what it looks like presently. Yeah, with, like I said, 13, maybe soon to be 14 people.
Awesome. Do you also have an animal name?
No, I don't have an animal name because I just exist in this kind of like area up there. You know, I was talking about this with one of the people on the team just today because I mean, it's just for fun. Like we do that. And some people pick like fictional animals and some people pick real animals, and they have like these complex reasons for it. It's just a fun thing to do. And it gives the team sort of like an identity. But I wanted to reserve that for the PPC teams that are actually doing the hands-on management. And the reason for that is like, that is still the core of what we do. And that's like the most important thing we do. And so I see that as like really central to our whole mission. Like if we lose our way with that, then like we're not a good agency anymore. So we have to like keep that really strong. Yeah.
Yeah. And how have it been like growing from having sort of individual contributors to a situation where you have managers in the organization? Like, do you want to talk a little bit about like maybe the first person you sort of put into a management role, and you know how, first of all, how you got to that point, and then basically like what it felt like for you?
Yeah. So the first thing that I really needed to get off my plate and give to someone who could do a better job, a more consistent job, would probably be a lot of the client communications and back and forth. So the person I hired for that, who now is the COO and has grown into that role, originally came on with that kind of being like her primary mission, in addition to doing some operations stuff. But as her role shifted and gave her more and more responsibility, and she did a better and better job with it, quite honestly, decided that she was the right person to grow into that. I kind of do share your philosophy, Mads, of like having people on the team who you give them some tests, and if they do really well and they excel in that direction, then you continue to give them more and more responsibility until they kind of show that they're the right person for it. Instead of just hiring some person who maybe talks the talk and looks really good on paper, but they don't know your industry or your company just yet. It's a longer, slower process, but I do like that way of doing it. And that's how her development kind of happened. And that was a real game changer for me personally, because I got to get out of a lot of that and focus on company growth. And that has really helped get us to where we are now instead of me being involved with those things.
That makes a lot of sense. Good. It's always interesting to hear, because I think for a lot of people, like a lot of my listeners, they either maybe have some management already, or they're really looking to start building in a layer of management, and it's really it's good for them to hear a lot of good examples, right?
Yeah, I think you need to make it as clear as possible to that person what their responsibilities are and where they end. Like, I want you to do this, this, and this, and you also, this is something I really struggle with. I could probably talk about for 20 minutes as part of this conversation, but like, I really struggle with letting go with some things and saying, all right, this is your jurisdiction and you have the responsibility and agency. And if you make a decision, I'm not going to come in at the last moment and go, no, I want to do it this way, actually. You just got to say, I respect your decision, I respect your jurisdiction, and whatever choice you make, I'll stand behind that. I trust you to do it. And that means the world to people. So that's really important to have figured out. And I've learned that the hard way. People have approached me who have said, you're not letting us do our job, basically.
Yeah, and that's, for a lot of sort of perfectionist and detail-oriented people, right, that is very common. I think for me, one thing that really made it significantly easier was setting very specific goals, right? Because so often when you're quite detail-oriented, you get boggled down in how it's done. But when you actually set very clear KPIs and very clear goals to people, it's easier to just look at that goal and saying, are they hitting the number? Are they hitting the number? And really focus on the number rather than the process, right? And let them own and manage the process. So that's, at least for me personally, that's something that have been super helpful for me.
I should be taking notes.
But yeah, it's a situation, many people are in it, right? Like my focus and generally how I always talk around it is the fact that you're always looking to do more valuable stuff, right? So if you're doing things right now that's, if you're doing tasks right now that's worth $50 an hour, or someone getting paid $50 an hour could do, then really your time will not be worth more than $50 an hour, right? So really, like, that mindset for me have always been a huge help in sort of helping to really grow the business and really letting go, right? Because I can see, like, I mean, if I look back in my career, like, I was horrible at it as well. Like, I would, when my team went home, I would sit and check, like, I don't know, the customer service inbox and like, oh, there's one email, let me just answer to that. And just stupid stuff that made me feel busy. But it was something like someone else would do it for 10 cents or 20 cents or something, like, by the time it took, right? But, I just felt stupid. I wanted to check everything. And, that was early on in my career when I wasn't yet at the level I'm at now, where, I've really learned to look at the numbers. I've really learned to let people take that ownership. And I find that really, that's really empowering, at least.
So you're using your superpower, so to speak, instead of your just normal powers you're able to execute on. Because, what we do with ad management, I love to do. I still love the ins and outs of, campaigns and keywords and like, how are we going to set this up? How are we going to collect that data? How are we going to look at it? I love that stuff. I could do it for 8 hours a day. I did it for 12 hours a day for years. And like, at this point, I'm kind of like, I can't really do that so much anymore. I don't actively directly manage accounts. I have a lot of input and oversight on many of them. But and I don't change the bids anymore. I don't do that stuff. But it still feels great. So you can fall into that trap where you're like, I'll just relax on a Wednesday night and do a couple hours of account management. But then I'm stepping on someone else's toes, and I don't want to do that to people on the team.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think fundamentally you say you can't do that anymore. I think, and this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of clients, right? That like in what we do, there's this assumption that, you know, you have to be the business owner, you have to be the CEO. But I actually work with quite a few clients that, just like you, really love what they do. Like one of the girls I've worked with was a writer, is a writer. And, you know, she literally hired a team around her, like similar to yourself. She had hired a CMO type person. She had hired a finance person, and she had actually hired a CEO as well, because she just loves writing so much, right? So that's still an option, but it's very important to keep it up against, what do I want to do? Do I want to build a business that makes a lot of money, or, you know, do I want to have a comfortable time doing what I love doing? And the ideal middle ground is often somewhere in between, right? But I think it's mentality-wise, it's always very important to say, it's not that I can't do it, but, you know, I'm making a conscious choice to focus on growing the business, because I'm the best place at this. Because I think a lot of the time in your mind, if you're saying like, you know, oh, I can't do that anymore, you're kind of prohibiting yourself, and you kind of end up jumping into it just because you miss it once in a while, right?
Right, and maybe for writing, I don't really know. I'm not that great of a writer. I struggle to send out our monthly newsletter to our clients. But yeah, when it comes to PPC, it's like you have to keep your hand in the game, so to speak, at least a little bit. And, you know, I do that. I've actively managed some accounts up until just recently to understand the nuances of things. But I also have to have someone on the team whose job is that responsibility is one of their main responsibilities, to keep up with the best practices and what's new and what's working in our accounts, and, you know, collating and collecting the data related to it. So yeah, there's that kind of like keeping your sword sharp concept, which is also a part of that.
Then let me ask you the business question. Why do you need to keep that skill sharp?
I need to be able to speak to prospects and clients about it on sales calls, or, you know, at conferences when I give talks. That's an important thing. I need to make sure that my knowledge is up to date, and I don't get up on stage and, you know, say something that's 6 months old or not really relevant anymore. That always concerns me, you know, because this is a very fast moving industry, spurred along by Amazon's aggressive plans for growing it. You know, it's their ad platform. So things are changing frequently. You know, that's one of my fears, is that I'll get up on stage and people will be like, well, that's not true anymore. What is he talking about? You know, I don't like that.
Yeah. And any reason why your expert person couldn't do that while you were running the business?
I'm not sure if he feels comfortable being on stage just yet. I'm not sure if he would be into that. Yeah, I mean, it could be a good thing to explore for sure. One thing we're doing this year is trying to send more people to conferences, even if I'm not with them. You know, historically it would be, oh, I'll go to a conference and, you know, you guys can join me there. But this year I want to say, all right, you know what, you're going to go to a conference, and I want you to bring home this, this, and this in terms of results. You know, talk to this many people, give some business cards, like, you know, go to this event, et cetera, because our team is all over the world. I mean, we have people in Central America, North America, Europe, Asia, even have someone in South America right now. He's just traveling there, but still he's there. So we, you know, we have quite a big footprint geographically. Yep.
And there's a lot of cool conferences happening everywhere. So very often it's not necessarily required for you to fly halfway around the world when you have a team member sort of living next door type thing. So
exactly.
Good way to cover more ground. Okay, very, very interesting. Where like from a business standpoint, like where does most of your business come from? Like, has it mostly been word of mouth, or have you done very good sort of marketing, or what's your sort of most consistent lead source?
Most consistent would be word of mouth and referrals, for sure, which I think is the case for a lot of, you know, small business to business companies. Ours is no exception there. We are ramping up more content marketing, and we have referrals through, you know, companies aren't necessarily like partner companies, but are like companies we have nice agreements with, where it's like, hey, we'll send you clients, you send us clients, cool. You know, there's no like paperwork or percentage of this, percentage of that. I'm not really focused on like these like small amounts of money changing hands for like affiliates or whatever. I don't really care about that. It's more about like, where can we serve the clients? And if we have this ecosystem of like trusted partners, then that's great. So we get referrals from that, which is fantastic. Additionally, I have two business partners who are not involved in the day-to-day, but, you know, jumped in early 2018. And both of them have like very large networks. So that's been nice to have that. And that's like an advantage that's, somewhat unique and I think is hard to replicate.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're trying to do like more, old school, old school in the sense of the internet, content marketing and maybe even some paid traffic, which we've experimented with before. But we currently don't do, which is kind of funny because we're a paid ads company.
Yeah, it's always interesting, right? I mean, yeah, every time you look at a web design company's website, you get scared. So, yeah.
right. They're not taking their own medicine. Yeah, they're too busy making it for other people, right? So why bother?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, just a couple sort of more managerial questions then. Like, how do you when you hire new staff? So you said you're just around hiring. How do you onboard new people? Like, what's sort of your best tips and tricks, and what have you found work really well for you guys?
Yeah, good question. So I kind of look at it in two parts. There's the first part, which is understanding the tools that we use as a company and becoming familiar with using those tools so you're an effective member of the team. And then the second part is understanding what we do. Right? Those two things are two separate things. And I think for a while, the training documentation and things we had was like a combination of both of those, and it kind of muddied the waters. But I think that now we have a better delineation between the two. So the first is like, yeah, this is Slack, and this is, we have a G Suite account we use as a company, and this is how to use this, and get familiar with Google Docs or whatever, all these different tools that we use now. And it's so easy with different cloud providers and tools online. And then the second part would be that training. So what we've determined works really well for a training is what we call the Pathfinder Bootcamp. So basically we send people through a series of like weeks of training. Like, here's the articles you need to read, listen to these podcasts, look at these SOP documents and videos that we've created and hopefully updated recently, depending on how the tasks change. And then they actually get hands-on with accounts. So we start them off with training wheels, of course. We don't want anyone to be working with huge accounts and making potentially grave errors there. So we start people off with the hands-on as soon as possible. And that's how we've taken people through and had some people on the team who have little to no ad experience. And then 2 years later or 6 months later even, they're managing accounts that they never would have dreamt of even before that time. That's been successful for us. I think separating those two is important.
Yeah, I really like how you do that. And I think a lot of companies focus actually solely on the training aspect. They're like, this is how you use the system, this is the process, do this, do this, do this. And a lot of companies actually forget to give new employees, like particularly critical employees, give them a good overview of this is our business. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is our core products. This is our core customers. A lot of business actually totally overlook that, right? And as a new person joining a business, that information is so relevant to make day-to-day decisions that's a big oversight in a lot of companies, right?
Right. Like how does what I'm doing fit into the larger picture kind of thinking? Yeah, people need to understand that. Yeah, I mean, I think I could probably do an even better job on that. Like we have our core values, for instance, which we do take seriously and we do talk about. And like that's on our website, but that's also one of the first things you see when you're training is like this is kind of who we are as an identity. And we're very upfront about that when we have people who might want to join the company too, because they need to know this is what we stand for. If you agree with these things and you like the way they sound, then you might be a good fit here.
Yep. Love it. Okay. What about, I mean, we touched on delegation already, right? So if we just go down on delegation a little bit more and talk through that. So what's sort of been your lifespan on delegation? Like, how have you gone through delegation so far, and what's sort of the key lessons you have learned, and sort of the sort of tips and tricks on delegation that you could share?
Well, there's the one framework that I've used for a while is like the Eisenhower grid, like that 2x2. Are you familiar with this?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's like do, defer, delegate, and delete, right? So you have 4 different categories you can put things into. And using that framework for determining what I shouldn't be working on has been probably the most useful thing. It's either something that someone else can complete much faster or they can do much better. So if it falls in one of those 2 criteria, then I'm going to try to figure out who on the team is right for that. And usually I have that person in mind like straight away. And so it's just a matter of talking to them on a call, 20 minutes and explaining it. or setting it up in our task management system, with like a task assigned to it. And the idea is those people in those roles already have a very clear idea of what their role entails. So they know exactly what they should be responsible for and should be doing. So it shouldn't be a surprise. There are definitely ad hoc requests that we have to make to people on the team, and people make to me, of course. But that should be less and less the case going forward. I'm not sure if that gets to the heart of your question.
Definitely, I think that's. I mean, it's very interesting. I like the Eisenhower model. The one I kind of struggle with a little bit is the fact that sometimes I might be the one who can do it fastest, but because I'm paid significantly more, I'm still not the right person to do it. So sometimes even though someone can do it and it might take longer, there might still be a much better person to do it. But yeah, generally it's a really nice framework, and actually it's really good when you're looking at emails, for example. I really love it because it's a great way to run through a large volume of email and clear it out and say, well, do I do it? Is it something that needs to be done later, or do I give it to someone else or just totally delete? All right, so yep.
Yeah, because we've all been in that situation where you do have that email and it eats up so much of your mental RAM, for a day or 2 days or a week.
Totally.
And you finally send it or delete it or do whatever. And you're like, oh, I just should have done that from the beginning. I mean, I have one of those right now open, and I'm thinking about it like an open loop in my head, right? So after this call, got to go resolve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Very good, Brent. I think that's some very good advice and some very good tips so far. From a management standpoint, like what do you personally enjoy with like managing other people? Like what's sort of the core thing you enjoy the most about it?
Oh yeah, this is an easy one. I really enjoy how people's personalities come out in the work that they do. If someone is more careful and methodical, and you can see it in the work that they do and the way they communicate, or fun stuff like someone on my team, for instance, is from Switzerland, but he played football, like American football, for years in Switzerland. And then you just talk to him about that and that experience and all the information that is behind that. That's a lot of interesting life experience in Europe, where I never would have expected that American football was popular. And so it's just all these experiences that people have in their life all combined to inform the kind of person they are and the kind of work they do. And so I like how those little bits of personality show in work. That's one of the first things that I really enjoy. And then I would say the second piece that's kind of related to that would be how people can surprise you. You might give someone a task or delegate something to someone, and they do a way better job than you ever had envisioned yourself. And they do a way better job than you would have done, which is equally as important. And so that is such a rewarding thing to have happen. And I love having people on the team who are so sharp and they can deliver on that stuff. That really makes me that just makes it for me. That's way better than a lot of other things with businesses, like that feeling.
Yep. No, totally get it. I totally follow that. And I mean, that's one of the beautiful things when you start hiring people and working with people for a period of time and, give them ownership and stuff. And I have a whole bunch of stuff in my business that I know absolutely nothing about how it happens or why it happens and so on. And it's really, really nice when you have people who are much more qualified than yourself doing things that just works, right? That's the machine, and that's the stuff I love building. I mean, I love building teams, and I love building organizations and so on, and really seeing that come to fruition and really, see people blossom. That's amazing feeling, I think.
I like the idea you just touched on there, Mads, which is this concept of people in the company doing stuff that you don't even understand how it works, or don't necessarily need to understand the machinery of how it works, because that has only more recently started to happen to me. Where I've, taken my hands out of stuff, or said, okay, this is the responsibility of you and you and you, or just you. And then I come back to it later and they have a mature system for that. And I look into it or I examine it and I'm like, that works pretty well. And, I had little to nothing to do with the setup and current execution of it, but they have determined, because they're smart, what needs to be done. And if I come in and I try to give my 2 cents, I don't have the informed opinion anymore, and I should basically keep my nose out of it. That's kind of my sense of it at this point.
And actually, a really good trick here, and a lot of this online business advice is kind of the cause for this. But one thing is, most entrepreneurs think they need to figure something out and then delegate it. and they're constantly trying to figure out everything in the business and delegating it.
Right.
Very, very good advice is instead, if you hire some bright people, if you need, like an example for me is the podcast here, right? When I needed to start a podcast, I could totally have sat down and figured out how to do it and do everything the best way. But instead, like I hired a girl, I gave her the responsibility, and she had a HR background. She had nothing to do with podcasting, to be honest. She probably never heard of podcasts. But I laid out some very clear goals. That needs to happen once a week. We need to have some good show notes. We have to make sure there's a good email feedback to clients, to the people on the show, etc., etc. And basically that way, set some very clear expectation for the sort of goals for the podcast, right? And that way, I let her run with it. I let her figure out like how we're gonna host the podcast, if it's even called that. I let her figure out everything. But the golden nugget, and this is something most entrepreneurs could really benefit from, is when there's new stuff that needs to be done in your business, try and give the responsibility for doing it to someone in your team instead of taking it yourself. Because when you do that, you stop being the expert, and the person you give it to is the person people come and ask questions instead of you.
Right. I think that last part is the biggest distinction, because we do have these kind of compartmentalized aspects, like, someone's responsible for overall ad strategy, and we have people who are responsible for other smaller pieces. Like finance, for instance. Someone messaged me the other day, what's the credit card we can use to buy this piece of software? And I said, don't talk to me, talk to this person. And sure enough, they did. They went and bothered them, and they got it solved faster than I ever would, because they have all the information on file. They use it all the time, et cetera, et cetera. But for instance, like a good example from my own business is like, I don't necessarily want to figure out our social media presence. Like we had a Facebook page, which I rarely posted to, but I'm not really much of like a social media person in general. So I wasn't really like keen on doing that. But we had the marketing person come in, our part-time CMO, and he's a pro, and he's got it loaded into software. He's got it automated. He's got it all sorted out. So, I don't want to be the expert at that. And he's more than capable of already handling that. I don't need to learn it. So that's okay with me.
Awesome. Yeah. Very good, Brent. Very good. Definitely been a pleasure talking with you. Any sort of last hints and tips and the likes that you want to share with the audience? Any amazing resources or the likes?
Amazing resources. Only one thing comes to mind, and that would be Dynamite Jobs. We've got a lot of our best hires from Dynamite Jobs. If you're running a remote team, that has been awesome for us, because the pool of people there are those who are already interested in I almost spoke French. In French, it would be dématérialisé, like a remote work. Basically, so people who are looking to work from a distance. And because that's already like one of the pre-selected kind of groups of people who listen to that podcast and are on that site, which I think is like thousands of members they have on there now, looking for jobs. They already get the whole thing. Like they get Slack. They know that they have to, be flexible sometimes with hours, and be on that call at 7:00 in the morning their time if it's 1:00 for me here or whatever. That's just the constraints of like a global economy and that. So that has been a big like 80-20 for us, is using that site to find candidates. And a lot of them have been very accomplished people who are just have had great careers or currently are just looking to do remote work and travel around, and they want more flexibility and freedom. So that's been a huge one. The other thing I would say, as far as like tips or tricks, hire earlier than you think you should would be my other piece of advice.
Love it. Yeah, very, very, very rarely have I ever heard people say, "Oh, I hired too early." Like it's always like, "Oh, I wish I hired a year earlier, 6 months earlier." But I don't think I've ever had a coaching client that have said like, "Oh, I hired too early." I've seen once or twice I asked the question when I'm speaking to a large crowd, and sometimes I see a couple of hands go up. But very, very rarely people hire too early.
Right. I can't think of a single time when I've said that for anyone on our team. And like I said at the top of the call, even now where we have a lot of clients, coming on board, doing a lot of audits, and I wish we had more people on the team as it is, and we're working on that. But it would be nicer if we already had it done. So
excellent. Well, fantastic. If people want to get in touch with you, Brent, what's the best contact details and so on?
Yeah, sure. If you just Google AMZ Pathfinder, that's like AMZ Pathfinder. You can find us on, Google, obviously, but you can find us on Facebook too. If you want to email us directly, you can email hello@amzpathfinder.com. That works too. And
Perfect.
Yeah, if you want to get in touch, all those ways work. I'm happy to take calls with anybody about anything Amazon related. It's always fascinating to talk to sellers or business owners from all different corners of the Amazon world. We know a lot of people in the industry, and it moves so fast. There's always something going on. So it's exciting to talk to people.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Brent. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for the call. This is nice.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.